Thank you for waiting. Now it's 10 o'clock Tokyo time. We'd like to now start our seminar. Today, we would now like to start our event for today. What are the 3 elements needed for startups to win at the global stage, co-hosted by the University of Tokyo Institute for Future Initiatives, Sumitomo Life and JETRO. I am Imura from JETRO, acting as the facilitator for today. This is the timetable for today. Firstly, from myself, I will talk about the aim of today's seminar, and after that, 2 keynote speeches and 2 panel discussions. Firstly, I will talk about the outline and the background for today's event. The 3 parties, namely University of Tokyo, Sumitomo Life, and JETRO, have been working on comparative research project on Japan-US Born Global since fiscal year 2021. This project is aimed to create born global startups by comparing and analyzing various elements in Japan and US and communicating the results to external parties. Last year in 2021, in the research conducted in 21, we looked into around 50 companies in Japan and US, total of 100 companies, and consequently extracted 3 elements which are musts for giving birth to born global startups. Those 3 elements are shown on the screen right now. The details of these 3 elements, we will discuss about those during panel discussion number 2. The comparative research project on Japan-US startups is still ongoing, but this time about these 3 elements, in order to present the significance of these 3 more deeply, we decided to have this seminar as an event. Due to these backgrounds in today's seminar, we invited speakers from Japan and US, and we'll talk about the importance of these 3 elements. Also, keynote speech will be given by Mr. Tony Raven, former CEO of Cambridge Enterprise and founder of Cambridge Enterprise. Tony-san, Mr. Raven, this is the page to introduce him. He is a researcher cited in many papers and books, and also he has been successful as a serial entrepreneur as well. He is an international leader for commercialization of university researches. Cambridge Enterprise, he has led this firm for about 10 years and have been commercializing various and many researches conducted by the university. Currently, he has been advising to the UK government on technical migration, etc. Today, based on his vast experience as an overseas mentor and investor, he will be talking about building an innovation ecosystem. So now over to you, Tony-san.
Yes, and thank you very much for your kind invitation to join you today and share some of my experiences and observations of building an innovation ecosystem. I've spent many years trying to understand and develop innovation ecosystems across the world, but I'm going to concentrate today mainly on what happened at Cambridge, but the lessons I think are common to many other successful ecosystems. Next slide, please. So I come at this from a number of different angles. I've been a researcher, including a very wonderful time I spent at Handai in Osaka University as a researcher. I've been a serial entrepreneur with 3 successful companies. I've worked in tech transfer at a small university and most recently 10 years at the University of Cambridge. And I was the creator of something called 10U, which is the technology transfer offices of 10 of the world's leading universities, including Stanford and MIT, Oxford and Cambridge. And then as part of that role, I've set up a number of investment funds around university spin-outs. Next slide, please. So a quick timeline of the Cambridge cluster development, because these things don't happen overnight. And in the early days, I think there was no particular plan to Cambridge, and the way it developed, it just happened. More recently, there's been much more attempt to put a structure onto this. But it really started, people think, in 1960, when a company called Cambridge Consultants was set up to put the brains of Cambridge University at the disposal of the problems of British industry. So it's to use the university ideas to help British industry. But Cambridge itself was not very receptive to industry. In 1967, IBM wanted to set up their European headquarters, research headquarters in Cambridge, and the city turned them away and said, we don't want industry in the city. But that led to a report by Neville Mott, a Nobel Prize winning physicist, that ended the opposition to industrial development in Cambridge in 1969. And immediately following that, Europe's first science park was set up by Trinity College, one of the colleges of Cambridge University. At that time, the intellectual property from research was owned by the government, but in 1987, that was transferred to the university ownership. Now, alongside that, one of our most successful companies, ARM, the chip designer behind most of mobile computing, was set up in 1990. And I'll say more about that later. In 2005, Cambridge Enterprise was set up by the university, although there had been organizations with different names that came before that. And then in 2012, we set up Cambridge Innovation Capital to actually back financially the companies which were coming out of the university. Next slide, please. And it didn't happen overnight in terms of technologies either. In the early days, Cambridge's strength was in radio, in scientific instruments and aerospace. And then in each decade following, new technology areas were added. So first of all, computer-aided design, and then inkjet printing, technology consulting and software. And you can see in red, each decade, the new technologies which were added. And most recently, the technologies have been things like artificial intelligence and cybersecurity, batteries, electric vehicles, speech, many new ones added since 2010. Okay, next slide, please. One of the things we've done in Cambridge is to map all of the technology companies in Cambridge, and you will see there are about 5,000 companies there. They're turning over just under 20 billion pounds, so about $20 billion of revenue, and employing 71,000 people. And the size of the region, the population, is about 600,000. So more than 10% of the population work in technology industries. Next slide, please. And most recently, Cambridge has had over 23 unicorn companies. And most recently, we've had 4 new ones join that group. And if we include the investment fund, Cambridge Innovation Capital, that's 5 new unicorns. So for a small city of 130,000 people, 600,000 people in the region, this is quite a powerful engine. Next slide, please. One of the things which has happened over the last 10 years is then all those 5,000 innovative, often deep tech companies have attracted in major players to be part of the community. And I've seen similar things happen in places like San Diego and Austin, Texas, which is that large number of small, exciting companies attracts the big companies who want to partner with them and want to acquire them. So we have Amazon in Cambridge because the Amazon Alexa was first developed in Cambridge. Qualcomm moved in to acquire a company in broadband and Bluetooth chips for mobile computing. AstraZeneca moved its headquarters to Cambridge. Apple acquired a company in the Siri space to add to its technology. Microsoft, Huawei, a brother from Japan, moved in because of the inkjet printing capabilities. So that's the latest phase of the development. Next slide, please. But one of the important things about Cambridge is the importance of people, and this, I think, is true of many ecosystems. Next slide. I'm sorry that this slide is very messy. I borrowed it from somebody else and I didn't have time to clean it up. But what you see here is rings. So this is 1950s, 1960s, going through to 1992,000. And these are the companies and the people who were backing them. And you will see that there are some common people going throughout all of those decades. So Herman Hauser, Andy Hopper, and David Cleevely are ones that I have highlighted. And but there are many others who have been working through that period. First of all, starting their own companies, becoming successful entrepreneurs, and then supporting as mentors the new companies which are starting up across Cambridge. So where did they come from? Well, Herman Hauser, he was a founder of ARM Computing. He came to the university, he joined the university from Austria to do his doctoral degree, his PhD. His co-founder of ARM was Andy Hopper, who came to the university from Poland to do his PhD. And when they finished their PhD, they liked Cambridge, they wanted to stay, so they tried to find things to do, and the thing they found to do became ARM. And then we have David Cleevely. He came to Cambridge to do his PhD from another part of the UK. So these people come into the university and stay and move on. And there's an interesting statistic I found in the United States that 50% of the billion-dollar companies in the United States have a founder who is an immigrant. And half of those immigrant founders came to the United States first as university students. So they came to the universities, and then after graduating, they started their companies, which went on to become $1 billion. And they are a big engine in driving that activity. Next slide, please. And I think we have in Cambridge now a lot of mentors and coaches who help our new companies starting up and growing and create the ecosystem. Many of them are angel investors, so they're investing themselves to start these companies, and most of them have been successful entrepreneurs. But why have I put this slide up? And it's because there is a difference between a mentor and a chief executive. And this is quite important, and we do training about how to be a mentor. The chief executive is the one kicking the ball. He's the head of the team. He's responsible for the players on the field and what they are doing. The coach is the one that helps them be as good as possible. But in this case, in the coach of the Japanese national team, he was a very successful player. He knows what it is to be a chief executive, but he doesn't run on the field and start kicking the ball. He stands there and he gives advice and guidance from the side. And we find many mentors and coaches, when they first join, they are with a CEO who's not experienced. And rather than helping the CEO develop his thinking of how to run the company, they take over. They want to become the CEO and they say, it's easier. I know how to do this. I'll do it. That's the wrong way for a coach. It's important to have people who are there, like the coach in the football team, who is helping the players, who is helping the founders. He is not taking over from them. Next slide, please. The other thing which is important, I think, for successful ecosystems is investment capital, money for the companies, the startups in the ecosystem. Next slide, please. When I arrived at Cambridge, two things I said is the mission of Cambridge Enterprise is to have an ambition which is worthy of a university like Cambridge. So Cambridge is a very ambitious university. It's a world-leading university, and we have to have the same ambition to do justice to the opportunities that our academics create. And to do that, we needed access to significant funding. That was in 2012. Next slide, please. And this is how it's developed. So when I arrived in 1995, a seed fund had been set up by the university with £2.5 million. In 2009, on the 800th anniversary of the university, they tried to raise a philanthropic fund from donors, and the target was 5 million. They managed to raise 1 million from donors, so that was not very successful. And that has been combined now with the seed fund. But we set up a fund which was for the alumni of the university and friends of the university, which was based around a tax break and investment. It wasn't a gift like the Discovery Fund, it was an investment. And that fund is raising about £3 million a year from our alumni and supporters of the university. And then to allow our companies to grow with ambition, we set up Cambridge Innovation Capital with initially £50 million from three city investors in London. Where are they today? These two are now the seed funds, and they have more than £100 million of assets under management in 2021. And CIC has now raised £500 million and has more than £1 billion of assets under management. So you can see these funds have been successful as funds when they have ambition. Next slide, please. And you can see that in the figures. In 2011, our average investment was £50,000. In 2021, it's £250,000, so 5 times bigger. And you can see the number of investments approved has gone up from £500,000 a year now to £8 million a year with the two funds, the University Fund and the Alumni Fund. And the assets under management have grown as well to over 100 million now today. So that's the impact that the fund has in Cambridge, but it's not just Cambridge. Let me show you Oxford. Next slide, please. This is Oxford since 1959. So for many years until 1998, they left it to the market, to external investors and entrepreneurs to develop companies. You see a small number of companies. Oxford Instruments is the famous and big one. Then they set up an office to support the spin-out companies from the university, and you saw the number of companies every year increase. But then they set up an investment fund called Oxford Science Enterprises, and that is also $1 billion fund. And you can see the effect that having access to significant investment in Oxford has made to the volume of companies flowing into the ecosystem and growing the ecosystem. That's Oxford. Next slide, please. And this is not just big universities. This is in South Africa. This is Stellenbosch University. And this is their historical number of spin-out companies with a government fund available. But the fund took 2 years to take decisions. And then when they set up the South African University Technology Fund, you see again, the number of companies starting to come out and grow increases very rapidly. So access to investment is very important. Next slide, please. I'd also say, because in Todai, in Tokyo University, you have one of the world's leading universities, and universities are, in my observation, important to all the successful clusters. If you think Silicon Valley with Stanford, Kendall Square with MIT and Harvard, Austin, Texas, with the University of Texas in Austin, the Research Triangle in Carolina with 3 universities there. They all have universities at their center, the same with Cambridge and Oxford. But why are they important? Well, this is some data that I've received recently. 50% of the venture dollars, US venture capital dollars in life sciences go to university spinouts, and 20% in physical and engineering science go to university spinouts, which means that spinouts are a large part of the venture capital activity in the country, a large part of the growing technology companies going into these clusters. In the UK, 67% of the top 30 biotech and pharma companies are spinouts from universities, and 35% of the high growth life science companies are also university spinouts. And another piece very recent, 34% of incubators in the UK are supported by university funding, not commercial funding. So they are very important actors and players in this whole innovation ecosystem development. Next slide, please. But we often look at places like Stanford, Boston, Cambridge, and other places and say we all need incubators, we need everything they have, we need a Y Combinator, we need science parks. But they didn't start that way. In Silicon Valley, it started in domestic garages. So these are the places, if you click to bring up the animation, please. This is where Disney started. Next one is where Hewlett-Packard started. Next one, where Apple started. And the last one is where Google started. They didn't need incubators. They're nice to have, but they're not required. In Cambridge, the companies started in domestic houses. They started in bedrooms in domestic housing. And only later did the science parks and incubators come along. So they're nice to have, but they're not essential. What's important is to have some space and the money to support them. Next slide, please. So with that, I'll finish. I think my time is up, and say thank you for having me today. It's been very enjoyable to join you in this seminar, and hope that the innovation ecosystem in Tokyo, which is already very active and strong in international measures, continues to grow with great success. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony-san. If there are any questions, please feel free to ask. Oh, please go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Kelly Langley. I'm with Langley Esquire. Thank you very much for your presentation. I'd like to ask a little bit about policies, and if you have any experience or if you've noticed any policies in particular in Cambridge that have really been kind of those that unlock the potential. Tokyo and Japan's national government is putting a lot of effort into redrafting kind of startup policies and identifying where are the lowest hanging fruit and the key barriers to fostering a startup innovation ecosystem. Do you have any thoughts or input on this front in terms of what the government can do to play a key role other than simply funding that may be a unlocker of this potential? Thank you.
Yes, and I think it is to act as a sort of a supporter and convener also. I think most of the ecosystems that we look at in the world, Cambridge, Stanford, MIT, in many ways they happened by accident. There was no big design plan, but there are certain features of them which are common. And research out of Michael Cohen at the University of Berkeley, California, has written on these, and they include things like they are very bottom up, they are very devolved, they do not sort of have some big central plan. They encourage people to be active, and Cambridge is very much an extreme on that. Individuals have great freedom to do whatever they want. The university doesn't try to control them, and it allows things to just grow organically and allow. Cambridge is the University of Darwin. It allows Darwinism to act on these ideas. So if the ideas work, they will grow and they will be successful. And if they don't work, they will die and disappear. Interestingly, recently, I've been working with the people in New York, and I think this is one of the few ecosystems which has been built by design, and that involved the universities in New York and the New York Development Authority. And it was there very much, they provided small amounts of money not to do anything specific, but just to bring people together to start talking. Not trying to control it, not trying to tell them what to do, but just getting conversations started. It would provide money for dinners, it would provide money for events to bring the founders of the startups together. And Mayor Bloomberg, the mayor of New York at the time, would come to these events and spend the evening with the founders of these young companies to show that New York thought it was important. So there's lots of things I think you can do, and there's lots of experience around the world. It's difficult to cover it all in the answer to one question, but that's something I'd be very happy to talk about offline if you want to explore it further.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so next.
I have another question. You mentioned something about the mentoring ecosystem of former founders, basically passing on the torch and sort of giving them advice of sharing experience. Is there also like a bigger mentor ecosystem that is not basically born from Cambridge, but maybe from surrounding areas or maybe worldwide? Can you sort of talk about the sort of setup or the mix-up of the mentor ecosystem in Cambridge?
Yes, well, there's the ecosystem in Cambridge, and that works well. Over the last 3 years, it's been different, but it has mainly worked by people coming together at events. And they can be all sorts of events. They can be music concerts. They can be book launches. They can be business events. It's a small city. People come together and they bump into each other while they go shopping. And a lot of the interaction happens that way, mentoring. Or the connection of mentors to founders. But I think also, we also do use mentors who don't live in Cambridge. And one of the big advantages recently is the emergence of Zoom as a communication tool like tonight. So I'm actually sat in the Caribbean talking to you in Tokyo about this, and the ability to do online mentoring has become much bigger. I work with a number of places, and they say we don't have any successful entrepreneurs in our town, in our city, in our country. But the thing I say to them is, if that's the case, then you almost certainly have successful entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley, in Boston, in other places. Reconnect with those alumni around the world, the Japanese entrepreneurs around the world in successful ecosystems, and get them to mentor by a distance. And although we now use Zoom, my best mentor actually lived in Finland, and we did most of my mentoring was done in phone calls before we had all of the modern technology. So it is possible to do it remotely, and if you have good mentors who are around the world that you can identify and engage, they all seem to want to help their country of origin, and are very willing to give their time and help to help support the companies and select which are the good ones to invest in, etc. So yes, local mentors are best for physical interaction, but if you don't have them, use global mentors.
We have Mr. Thomas, APEC CEO of Skydio. We'll take the podium. Tom has a lot of experience of founding startups and as an entrepreneur himself, serial entrepreneur. As you can see, in the past, he has an experience of founding companies himself, and today he is the CEO APAC CEO of Skydio. This is a drone creating companies. So Tom-san, please start whenever you're ready.
Thank you for coming to my talk. Thank you for coming for this event. I think this is a really important topic for Japan, how to grow the number of startups and unicorns that can compete globally. And I especially want to thank, I know there's over 100 of you joining by Zoom, which I'm very thankful for, but I especially want to thank the people who came in person, because to build an ecosystem, you do it together. And so it is important, I think, to network and attend these events when you can. And so even today is very cold and rainy, but I appreciate it. I think online you have translation, but I guess here I don't see earpieces, so there's no translation. So, okay. 日本語だったら助かりますって思ってくれる方いらっしゃいますか?
Who wants to hear this in English? Be honest, if you want to hear this directly in Japanese, or you have no problem listening to this presentation in English. So I don't know which language should I use.
The slides are mostly English, so I'll do a little bit of Japanese, and then just for the people who might not be as quick on the English, here live, and then I'll probably just switch back and forth. We'll see. I'm gonna just play it by ear. Yoroshiku onegaishimasu. So I put the title "Serial Entrepreneur as a Profession" in Google Translate, and it said "Renzoku Kyoko namuru na yo" as the subtitle. I hope that's right. That's a joke. I will have a few jokes in my presentation, but I will tell you some of them, they're jokes, because I know in Japan, it's very rare for the audience to laugh, and it makes me really uncomfortable. So please laugh when you know it's a joke. About me, I love startups. So I've been working with startups for almost 20 years. Currently, I'm the APAC CEO for Skydio, which is the world leader in autonomous flying drones. And we are a unicorn startup from the United States. And we are the first unicorn drone manufacturer in the United States and the largest drone manufacturer in the United States. But really, we're an AI and autonomy company. I actually said I was going to do some Japanese in it. もともと弁護士だった。最初にシリコンバレーに。
I started out my career as a lawyer when I went to the Silicon Valley, and at the time, the venture company and the investors were my customers. And at the time, Lincoln Turn, they were still very little venture. We supported them, and Sequoia, they're the venture capital. We had a lot of experience. I gained a lot of experience.
I want to plug LinkedIn. I think in Japan, people need to use LinkedIn more. If you want to become a global entrepreneur, global startup, global ecosystem member, you really should be on LinkedIn, right? It's really, where all of Western kind of entrepreneurs and VCs interact quite a bit. And it's how you can leverage your network for introductions and support, because you can see who people are connected to. So this is a really powerful tool that I think is not used in Japan enough.
So I really suggest you use this.
Google, I actually entered Google as a lawyer. And it was actually a really, really amazing time because at the time, I think Google's legal team was the best group of legal people in the world. And the general counsels of Twitter, Square, Pinterest, Dropbox, the USPTO head, general counsel of Reddit, they were all peers of mine. They were all coworkers of mine during that time at Google. So it was really a kind of a collection of some of the best legal minds, not me, but them that were available. And I got to learn a lot. But I switched when I entered Google. As a lawyer, I supported the Android team, but I was asked to kind of switch to a business role to lead kind of the business partnerships for Android, which I did. And then I led Android for APAC after that. After Google, I started, I left to become an entrepreneur. And I founded and was CEO of a few startups. The first was 3LM, which was a mobile security software startup. And I was CEO and founder of that, and we got acquired by Motorola in the US. I was then an entrepreneur in residence at Excel, which is a top tier venture fund. I then started and was CEO of a startup called NextBit, which was acquired by gaming company Razer. And then I was also co-founder, not CEO, but co-founder of a few other startups over my career. There we go. Including one that IPO'd on NASDAQ. Is it working? All right. Not bad. Okay. As I mentioned, then I was an EAR at Excel. And of course, I was an executive at Motorola, Google, Razer, and some of these other companies. I've also been an active angel investor. I've invested in more than 30 startups directly. I've been lucky enough that some of those have become unicorn startups. I'm a limited partner in 7 VC funds. So I invest in VC funds that then invest into hundreds of startups. And that way I'm exposed to these startups and sometimes engage with them. And I'm an advisor mentor in Antler, which is an international kind of incubator group. And they're just starting their Tokyo cohort, I think early next year. And I'm going to be a mentor there. So I've been very active in startups and I'm pretty old. So I've been doing this for a long time. That was kind of a joke, but not really. Okay, why do I love startups? Right, so obviously you can tell I spent all my life, adult life on startups and I really love it. Why? Does anybody know who this is?
Who knows this person? Please raise your hand if you do. That's okay. I didn't know him for very recently.
Of course, made the mRNA vaccine that many of us took here, right? And so if you have a fever or side effects, blame him. But he's also the founder of 40 other companies at some extent, right? He set up kind of a platform for starting companies, and then he recruits CEOs and founders, co-founders, and starts these companies, right? He gave this amazing talk at MIT in 2018 that I love and really inspired me. And so he asked this question in the beginning. I'm just going to copy him because copying smarter people is very good time-saving technique for startups. Okay, so this is his presentation now for a couple of slides. So he asked this question of the audience: what is the biggest innovation in the past 50 years in terms of value creation? Right, so if you think about in the last 50 years, what has been the most important kind of invention? So personal computer, PC, mobile phone device, internet. Yeah, okay. This is definitely winning for those of you on the Zoom. Internet's winning. Search and social networks, not so popular. Biotherapeutics, not a lot of life science people. Genome, CRISPR. Okay, lots of interesting questions. Seems like internet is the big winner. So his proposition was that the biggest innovation is the startup venture as a vehicle for innovation commercialization, right? It's not any of these products or technologies. It is the ecosystem enabling startups to develop and distribute technology at a massive scale at a very quick speed, right? So, you know, the entrepreneurs, the venture capital ecosystem, and then iteration, et cetera. So Microsoft, Apple, Google, Facebook, all these companies that you see here, right? And I love this answer. I think this is exactly right, right? The biggest innovation is the ecosystem around creating startups, right? That is the most important thing. And it's just fundamentally important to technological progress in our time. And another reason I love startups, for a while in 20 and 21, just 4 technology companies, Google, Apple, Microsoft, and Amazon, just 4 had a bigger market capitalization than the entire Japanese stock market. Right, just think about it. If you look at the top 10 companies in the Japanese stock markets, 9 out of 10 of them are more than 50 or 60 years old, right? They're great companies, but they're very old. There's not a lot of new blood, new innovation, right? And so if you think about, if you compare that to just these 4 companies, right, that's the amount of value creation. And so I love startups because they're fun. And if you do it right, you can change the world. And because building a successful business is hard. So if you do it, why not try something huge? Any business is hard. Opening a store and selling a bakery, like a bakery or something, is hard. Everything is hard. But with a startup, the reward is if you succeed, it's much, much bigger impact, right? So why not go for it? So I'm here today because I'd like there to be more startups, and I want there to be better startups, especially here in Japan, right? And one key factor for a successful startup ecosystem is me. That was a joke. Thank you. Okay. But seriously, people like me, this is a joke, but it's a real point. Serial entrepreneurs are very important. Okay, why are they important? Two very important reasons. Serial entrepreneurs are better founders, and this is proven with data. And serial entrepreneurs are better investors. This is also proven with data. So there's a great book called Super Founders that my friend Ali wrote, and it's available in Japanese. You can buy it on Amazon. But I'm also going to give you like the 30-second description, unfortunately, but you should still buy the book because it's still wonderful. But what he did is he looked globally at all of the available unicorn startups that were at the time when he wrote the book. And he found that 70% had a founder in them that was a super founder. 70. Okay. A super founder is defined as the founder of a company, of a previous company that either exited at $10 million or more, or had at least $10 million in revenue. This was the most significant factor among anything else from unicorn founders, not their age, their education, where they went to school or level of education, their work experience before starting the company, whether or not they were technical, the market size of the industry they're going after, the location of their startup, the competitive landscape, etc. Nothing was as impactful as whether or not one of the founders was a serial entrepreneur, right? And in fact, the data shows that a super founder is 3.3 times sanbai ijo ni. So 3.3 times more likely to start a unicorn company. This is huge, right? Because a lot of luck is required. But if you're betting, and I have 2 tickets to sell you, and one has a 330% higher chance of winning, you want to buy that ticket, right? So it's very, very important. Also very interesting, even a failed serial entrepreneur, so somebody who failed and did not become a super founder, still has a 1.6 time higher chance of creating a unicorn than a completely new founder, right? So this is extremely important. This is the most critical factor for creating unicorns. So if Japan says we want 1,000 unicorns, right, then they have to help kind of either bring in or develop more serial entrepreneurs. Same for investors. A Wharton survey that's in Ali's book says that 85% of the most successful angels, counted by how many unicorns they have, were former founders. So if Japan is looking to grow the number of unicorn startups, then the number of serial entrepreneurs is, as future founders, future investors, is very important. Why? So why is that the case? My guess, my opinion, because entrepreneurism is a profession. And like any profession, you get better at it when you have experience, and you have a better network of people because you spend time in it. Very simple, very obvious, but we love the myth of the prophet founder, right? Humans react to hero stories, hero journeys. Somebody who was chosen by the gods to come on earth has a vision or a dream, and they work really hard and they make it happen. You know, that's the kind of story we all want to believe, but it's just not true. And these are examples just off the top of my head. I spent 10 minutes writing this slide, okay? So this is not a lot of research, but it's easy to show. Slack, great company, started out as a video game company. They were building an MMORPG, right? Totally failed. Stuart Butterfield, the CEO, was a serial entrepreneur, had a failure before, actually an MMO company originally. That turned into Flickr, which was a success, right? Then he started another MMO company, which wasn't working. That turned into Slack, right? Because they internally were using the tool and they loved it, right? Twitter was a side project at a failing podcast company, right? And originally the idea for it was essentially WhatsApp meets kind of AIM messenger status, like I'm busy right now, or I'm eating right now, or, you know, it was a very simple idea. It evolved into something that millions and millions of people around the world use. Instagram was originally a local check-in app. So it was basically Foursquare plus pictures. That was the entire concept. You go somewhere, I'm at a restaurant, you check in and you share a picture, right? And then it pivoted because users loved sharing the pictures. They didn't love to check in, right? Bill Gates, Microsoft is an amazing company, phenomenal. He didn't write DOS. He didn't have a vision to write an operating system for IBM and IBM clone PCs. His mom was on a charity board with an executive for IBM who mentioned that they need an operating system. He went and bought DOS, sold it to IBM, and made the brilliant negotiation to make it non-exclusive, right? Brilliant execution, amazing. I'm not taking anything away from that at all. But again, it's not the story of this mythical founder. right? Google, the founders didn't really want to start a company. Once Google started getting some traction, they tried to sell it for $1 million and they failed, right? Elon Musk did not start Tesla. I think he's absolutely responsible for its success, but it wasn't that he had this passion to start this car company. He came across it first as an investor and supported it and then joined it. And of course, Uber. Uber originally, if you look at the slides for the Series Seed, they said their addressable market was something like $10 million or $100 million because they were just focused on limousine drivers with downtime, right? It wasn't until Lyft started doing this, anybody can become a driver, that Uber was like, oh, that's a threat to us, let's do that. And it became Uber today, right? And of course, Facebook, according to the movie The Social Network, I have no information on this, potentially stole an idea, right? So it is true sometimes that you have a founder who's passionate about something and builds it, but most of the time, right, that's not the case, right? So this myth of the hero founder, you know, with vision and stuff, is just overplayed and we need to move on from it. Truth is the professional founder. How many people know this person? I don't. This was a LinkedIn post that I found while I was making the slides and I liked it. So Jasper was the 5th company, so this is the CEO of Jasper. Jasper was the 5th company that he and his co-founders had started. None of the previous 4 exited. Some raised some funding, some had revenue, but they were basically all shut down, right? So they're not super founder. But now Jasper, they raised $125 million Series A with a 1.5 billion valuation, 18 months after starting the company, right? So professional entrepreneur, that's what he wanted to do. He got better at it and he found something that really worked. This is especially true for enterprise startups. Consumer startups require more luck, I believe, right? With enterprise, you get more benefit from being a serial entrepreneur because it's much more formulaic, right? Key factors for enterprise success, enterprise startups, is being able to engage with a customer before, during, and after development, right? Listen to them, understand the problem, hire well, and execute quickly. Really, that's it. If you can nail this formula, you can kind of build any kind of enterprise company, right? And the more experience you have, the better you're going to be and the better people you're going to have to hire. So what's my hopefully not bad advice? First of all, startups are great. So go start one or go work in one. That's number one. Working in a US startup in Japan, I think, is a great way to start or learn. Working big companies in Japan is a terrible place to learn. And if you work at a big company, I'm sorry, you should quit right away. When you do start one, be more ambitious and be less humble. So as an angel investor, when I see companies in Japan, I feel like they need to have bigger dreams, right? More ambition, right? Don't be so humble. Just, you know, dream a little bigger. Doesn't mean you have to be mean. Don't be a jerk, but try harder. It's going to be hard anyway, so why not think big? Speed and focus are your only 2 weapons as a startup. This is critical to understand from the beginning. This is all you have. You don't have anything else. So out execute and move faster, right? Everything else is BS. Beware of survivor bias and black swan. Just Google these things, but these are terrible ways for startups to die because they see somebody else doing something and they're like, oh, we should do this. But they don't study all the failures that did that. They don't understand why. And there's a very strong recency bias and black swan situation where things will stick out in your memory and seem more common than they are, but they're actually really not. If you fail, do it again. Data says you have a better chance of succeeding. If you succeed, do it again. The data says you have a much better chance of succeeding. I showed these slides to my friend, Jeff Char, who's a very successful serial entrepreneur and educator here in Japan. And he suggested I deep dive on the good enough because he sees this as a very strong problem in Japan. So I'm going to deep dive on this a little bit. This is a quote from an author that I love. There's no such thing as good writing, only good rewriting, right? I think this is very true to pretty much every field and profession, right? So when I angel invest, I advise everyone not to spend too much time planning. You learn a lot more by doing and engaging with customers. Too much planning is actually a waste of time. Remember the examples of Slack, Instagram, etc. Complete pivots based on usage behavior, right? Once you get out there, you see what people react to and what not, what they don't. So I think in Japan, this is a little bit difficult because quality is so important. And that's great. I love the level of service here. I love buying Japanese goods, but it's also harmful to innovation. There's this 80-20 rule that is talked about a lot in Silicon Valley, which is you can get to 80% of your product or what you're working on fairly quickly. And then it's 20%, the last kind of features, the polish, et cetera, that ends up taking just as long, if not longer, and kind of kills you, right? And really, if speed and focus are your only weapons, right, this is where a lot of startups die. And so get out when it's good enough. Good enough just means that a customer can use it and give you usable feedback with things you can measure. That's it. Okay. I know in Japan, you want to make every customer happy and you don't want to have any complaints and bad experiences. That's crazy. You're going to die because you're losing speed and you're losing your only advantage as a startup, right? Get out, get feedback, measure, iterate. That's it. That's the only way you're going to succeed. I actually also asked ChatGPT because it's what everybody wants to do now for its advice about how to help Japan have a startup ecosystem. And ChatGPT said that ultimately the key is create a supportive ecosystem that encourages innovation and risk-taking. I thought that was pretty good. So I put it here. Sounds pretty good. Being comfortable with risk is important for any entrepreneur. Even if you fail, again, you're more likely to succeed. So we do have to focus on creating an environment in Japan where it's okay to fail. Failure needs to be okay because it's part of the process. It's also very important to create an environment where a founder can move on from a success, you know, especially after an IPO. So a lot of startups in Japan will IPO at a fairly, what I consider low valuation, right? $100 to $300 million, something like that, right? And then the founder is obligated to stay by the people who backed them, by the investors. They might take loans and have to buy stuff. All this stuff, it's crazy, right? Like, great, you IPO'd 200-300 million. There's a company. It's basically a good, successful small business. Quit. Move on, do it again, right? Don't stay there. And let's not create an environment where the founder feels like they have to stay there because it's better for everyone in the ecosystem if they don't, including investors and backers. Again, if you fail, do it again. If you succeed, do it again. And my friend Jeff agreed with ChatGPT as well. Also encourage more people to do it and others to do it. Let's encourage others. So I think I probably went over on time, but I would love to do some Q&A. Then Q&A は別に日本語でも英語でもどちらでも OK です。Thank you. All right, question.
I actually have two questions, but I'm just going to state one and then let you answer. So the first one is, you mentioned the 80-20 rule, and I couldn't agree more about the product quality. And I also have some experience studying a business here, and they start to, Japanese customers, especially in B2B, they tend to request a very high demand, high quality right from the start, even if they know you're a startup. And so do you have any tips or advice about how to go about this sort of, let's say, buying behavior or culture here?
The best words in enterprise sales in the US or Japan are the same. The answer is, it's on the roadmap. It is the best, most powerful answer you can give in any situation, right? It's on the roadmap. Don't commit to a time. Don't commit to specifics, but just say that it's on the roadmap. So make the customer feel appreciated. You've heard the feedback. You're going to look at it. You're going to solve it. Don't commit to a timeline, right? I think that's the biggest thing. I think at the end of the day, people are more understanding than you might expect. It doesn't come across necessarily sometimes in the tone of the requests, but as long as you tell them that you're taking it seriously and you're going to do it eventually, I think it's usually fine. And eventually you can even not do it. And it's okay as long as the product is otherwise working. That's worked for me, both in Japan and in the US. I think it's the best answer I can give off the cuff. And second question?
Right. The other one was basically the serial entrepreneur sort of culture that's sort of lacking in Japan. And I joined a company late as CEO, and then we were acquired. And it was very interesting experience. So in Japan, most people were like, you sold your soul, you're like your sell-off, you know, and all the American friends, or, you know, in Europe, they were like, oh, congratulations, like wonderful news, yeah, whatever. And then I stayed on as CEO for 2 years to post-merge integration. But again, when I decided, okay, I want to resign after the lock period was gone, the reaction was not like, okay, great for you, but it's more like you're sort of abandoning the team sort of thing. And I wonder, I mean, I read a lot of English media. I you know, spend some time in the States now and then, but like, okay, what's the question here? How can you sort of cultivate that? I mean, other than, of course, showing more examples of serial entrepreneurs, What do you think is the sort of the key essence there that makes it more acceptable?
So that's actually kind of the fundamental point that I'm trying to make, and maybe I didn't make it well, which is we need to respect entrepreneurship as a profession, as a job, right? So your job is not, I started a company to make XYZ, and my whole life I'm going to make XYZ. Your skill is starting companies, right? I think of myself more as like an artist or a creator, right? I create startups, companies. You create something new jobs, new technologies don't exist before. And that's my skill. I can gather people, I can raise funding, I can lead a team to develop and launch something. And that's my skill set. It's not that I have to love or have my life focused on that product or that company. It's my skill is creating these companies, right? And we need more people like that. So we really need to just have a shift in mentality that entrepreneurism is a profession, like a chef or a doctor or any other kind of job. And as an entrepreneur, your job is to start companies. It's not to die a slow death at the acquiring company with all of their procedures and PowerPoint presentations and endless meetings, because that is a waste of your talents. And we need to understand that. Like, entrepreneurs need to build companies. That is what they do. And so there shouldn't be an expectation that once they succeed with an exit, they have to stay there. I think we just have to shift that. So by recognizing it is a profession.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
はい、じゃあ、残りですね、最後に。
Thank you. So lastly, okay, in Japanese. I have a question. I am an entrepreneur and I won the pitch contest and I'm starting to be successful. Congratulations. My question is related to the funding. I have little chances to learn to meet the investor. So I borrowed my loan, putting away my house. If I fail, I'll lose my house. I'll probably lose my family. Maybe this was true in the past in the US. And it's also still the same in Japan. We are still the second or third generation entrepreneur in Japan. Maybe we are still very old times kind of, but how can you overcome that? I think you're wonderful. I respect you for taking that risk in believing yourself, in creating, starting up, founding your company. It's something that people should respect. Good luck. I really hope for your success. And to answer your question, in the US, the entrepreneur, successful entrepreneur, even not a serial entrepreneur, there are angel investor. In English, we say pay it forward. It's like what that means is that what you have succeeded, I will pass it over to the next generation, somebody else. So if you're lucky, so people accept that you are lucky. Of course, putting in the effort is also another aspect. But a lot of people make effort, and there are many, many smart and clever people. So it's not only your efforts and your cleverness that you have success, because you always need luck. So people do accept that they were also lucky, and they were lucky, they succeeded, and they have a connection, fund. So how can they contribute back to society? So that's how they think. So I think we need to increase the number of angel investors and entrepreneurs who have exited. Could be, I don't know how to put this, need to learn how to contribute back to next generation. So they're rich, they succeeded. So let's drink expensive alcohols and go to bars, expensive bars. That's not the mindset. I think they need to do the mind shift. It's easy to say, I don't know how to do that. I'm sorry. Thank you. I really hope for your success. Tom-san, thank you very much. The time is here. So I would like to end Tom-san's session. Please give a big round of applause. Thank you. So next, we would like to move on to the panel discussion 1.
Thank you for waiting. Next, what is the diversity needed for startups? That is the title or topic for the next panel discussion. I would like to introduce the panelists for this session. Firstly, Ms. Tsunagawa, CEO of Bespoke, and next to her, Mr. Asano, CEO of One Act. These two people are the panelists for this session. And the moderator is Mr. Tarutani, who had worked on Japan companies startups deployment for more than 15 years overseas, and also had been working in San Francisco. Mr. Tarutani is the director of JETRO's Innovation Promotion Division. Good morning. Thank you for coming. It is raining today. Firstly, panel discussion number 1 from the perspective of diversity. We would like to move on. Just to introduce myself, as Imura-san had mentioned, right now I am helping Japan startup companies to deploy their business overseas. And before that, when I was in Silicon Valley, San Francisco, I had helped the startups to do business overseas. And at that time, with Tsunagawa-san and Asano-san using Zoom, how to explore the US market, I had been working on product market fit with these people. Today, we have 2 great speakers with diversity. We have these 2 CEOs today. So firstly, we'd like to ask the panelists to introduce himself, herself. Firstly, Tsunagawa-san, please. Good morning. I would like to introduce myself. Right now, it is my 8th year since starting this company, Bespoke. Before that, I was hired in a company. I was not that capable. I never thought of starting business, becoming an entrepreneur. I wasn't that much serious in what I really wanted to do. I never thought about that. But when I was 28 years old, I went to travel overseas. I had experienced some inconvenience, and when I came back to Japan, the inconvenient experience I had, I was wondering whether there is any service to solve the trouble that I had. I searched for that, but I could not find it. So I thought that I would try to start that service and started a company. Actually, the characters are a bit messed up on this slide, but after working for 3 companies, I started this company, Bespoke. Right now, the company is working on chatbot. I did not start this company to work on chatbot. There was this issue that I want to solve, rather for fun, another version of Trip Advisor. That's what I started to do. And as I conducted user interviews on a real-time basis, there is something that we want you to solve. That was what was required. And so I started doing some concierge type of service, but then was told that I need to resolve immediately. And then I started this chat service. Chat service was not working well on a real-time basis. So I started this chatbot. Chatbot was not that much available. Firstly, I was looking for a robot. 2011, when I was asked to explain to the member of the Diet, this person asked, what is chat? Or not even what is chat box? That was the case back then. But I realize nowadays that I am doing many global projects as well. I am also working as an expert for a meeting advising to Prime Minister Kishida in order to provide accurate information on a real-time basis to the government institutions or airports, hotels. We are providing this chatbot service to those entities. As a team, we have hired AI capable people from all over the world, total of 50. We have office in Japan and the US, developing everything on an in-house basis. As for JETRO, we are very thankful to JETRO. When we decided to start deploy business in the US, we had to have relationship with accountants, lawyers, etc. I visited JETRO for help. It took about a month or so to establish a corporation in US, and after that, JETRO introduced many mentors. I didn't think that one of those mentors paid in capital for our company, and also this person joined as executive vice president of our company. So we are very thankful to JETRO. Today, not about our team, but the points how JETRO helped us, what was meaningful, and the way we can ask for help in JETRO. I just want to explain those points as well. Thank you. Nowadays, after COVID, you visit overseas, and at Narita Airport, you can use this BPOT, which is bespoke service. Maybe you can try using that service at Narita Airport. Next, Asano-san, please. Myself, I also didn't think of starting a company. I joined Keyence, and I spent 8 years there. At Keyence, I was introducing the services that someone else made, but I wanted to build up services myself. So I started to do a company of my own. This service is to provide a high-quality source code marketplace. If you try to have these marketplace, PSX is the only one company providing this service. Users 70,000, and the number of transactions in 170 countries. There are no borders for this service. That is one of the characteristics. And the team is comprised of members from all over the countries. We have 5 offices, members from 12 countries, and partners and mentors from 7 countries. And the executives, Japanese is only myself, others are people from other countries. Right now we are having World Cup. In the pre-qualification matches, we had people from Germany, Costa Rica, and Spain. So we were all excited about the matches. And when I established the office in US, I was thankful for JETRO's help, and UK as well. And the awards that we won 4 years from now, that was chosen by JETRO. We applied and won the best startup. And also we exhibited in the Japan Pavilion and became the finalist. At the time, we were also helped by JETRO. Thank you. Asano-san, your PowerPoint is on the screen. So firstly, I would like to ask Asano-san, JETRO introduces mentors to companies in a very detailed manner. Why we introduce mentors, San Francisco or Silicon Valley, it is important as to who is your introducer. Some startups have a hard time finding investors. If you try to make appointments in many cases, it is very difficult to reach an appointment. So having a good introducer is very important. With the introducer, Asano-san, you were able to get funds from angel investors, and also was possible to have a capital alliance with a company in Korea. And also overseas companies are investing in your company. What are the advices that you have? What are the good points having individual investors or having capital alliance with overseas companies? What are the things that have changed?
The user creates more. So in the US, Silicon Valley, CEO is Japanese, and we get questions why investors is not involved. So being in Japan and the US, I think led to the trust. This multinational was the success factor. Yes, I think so. Well, Tsunagawa-san, I think this is a question for you. A person who was a mentor became the CEO. CEO, right? Yes. So how did you persuade the CEO, the person who used to live in the US now is living in Japan? In Japan? Yes, I came back to Japan. So you moved to Japan and decided to come back to Japan. How were you persuaded? In the previous presentation, serial entrepreneur's importance was presented, and he has founded a company 5 times. So I thought he must know very well. And if he have founded a company for 5 times, people may wonder, maybe he doesn't. I also had thoughts that he may be not good at practical administrative works. But we were taking very small steps. So in the very beginning, he helped to introduce the customers as the mentor through JETRO. And at the time, I believe what was people who live in Washington, D.C., or people, he has introduced to me a very influential person who used to live in Washington, D.C., and that really led to a lot of referral to the customers. And as we were doing this, the mentor said to me, he would like to invest a little bit. I thought a little bit, a little will not help. But as the mentor was helping me in my company, he liked our company, and I really liked that. And he has referred a lot of customers to me. So I thought if I was going to really work and stay in the Silicon Valley, he would be the best person to partner with. So I decided to get invested from him. And then that's how we started. I continued communication twice a week. I called him even when I didn't have anything to talk about. I didn't think he would move to Japan, but I communicated every time I can. And when I went on a business trip to the US, I always called and had dinner or lunch. And then when I continued to do that, just coincidentally, his children went to the university and all independent. So it was a very good timing in the lifetime. And I asked, and he said, why don't you move to Japan? And he said, you asked me so many times. Okay, I will. Wow, that's such a vitality. You weren't looking for money, but then you still got investment. Well, this is common. I think I hear that a lot. If you want to ask for money, ask for advice. We hear this kind of impression a lot. If you want money, ask for advice. It could go in vice versa. If you want advice, ask for money. I really like this expression personally. Money and investment and know-how is a package. It comes together. So you get investment, and the investor is one member of the team. So you would respect the diversity, and you have a very interactive communication and create something together. So you talked about investor and the mentor, but the whole team is all multinational. Asano-san, you are the only one Japanese person, and Tsunagawa-san, what's your proportion? 50-50. Yeah, we had too many Japanese members, so I kind of shuffled around people. So in terms of hiring people, you both coincidentally are the AI service provider. So you need to hire AI engineers and other people. So in order to hire international people, what do you do? How do you hire people? Well, we are a little unique and we are not so new. I don't go find people. I would look at the worldwide the hiring site, and we have recruitment ad on there. And then people who are interested in joining us, I'll try to meet online. So we don't recruit, they come to us. So they are highly motivated. And all the international staff who has joined our company, none of them has quit. It's almost free, the site. And my rule is I only pay up to 20, 30,000 yen. So the hiring cost is just time that I spend on doing the interview with these people, candidates. Wow, because companies, a lot of companies pay a lot for hiring. So we have something to learn from your style. How about you, Tsunaka-san? We are completely diverse. We would hunt for people. For example, our company, the most active salesperson is just coincidentally 3-4 years ago, was one of the speakers, and he was on the podium, and we had a chance to speak, and I sent him a handwritten letter. I traveled to Fukuoka to meet them, and I met his family, played with his child, spoken with his wife, and hired him. So very different from him. And before the COVID pandemic, there were a lot of events like this in overseas. So I would also go to the waiting room and then persuaded them to come to Japan and join us. Or since our services are provided at the public spaces like airports and etc. Sometimes I have a chance to connect with the users who liked our service. So there are opportunities like that too. You're always very aggressive, aren't you? There are many people here today, so you may find somebody that you may be interested in. Yes, I am not. I am always hiring people. So your company is very diverse, and sometimes you may have different opinions. For example, you have lived in the US and also other countries. Team bonding may be difficult. For example, management of KPI, compensations, parties. So bonding a team into one, is there something that you do? Asano-san, you too, you're everywhere in the world. I always have a 5-minute meeting every day. Even if it's a short meeting, I always make sure that we do this, seeing everybody's face online. And motivation perspective, international staff commit to their performance. So it's easier to manage international staff. So setting the clear, achievable goals, I think would be an important role for me. So every few months, I would have one-on-one meeting with my staff to check how the achievement is progressing. How about you? I agree with Asano-san. Managing the international staff sometimes is thought as being hard, but managing Japanese staff is harder. I agree. They're not very straightforward and clear about what they are worried about. They would keep it within themselves, feeling shy, showing that. Yeah, and Japanese people would say they have really worked hard and put in the effort. But international staff is very open and straightforward. If they cannot take on more a task, they would say so. And they're clear about it. So I am not doing anything special. But if maybe one thing I'm doing is like I try to have as many meeting online and if possible face-to-face lunch or meeting. If we're going to meet online, I would transfer about $20 and then we try to have lunch together, although we are online. That's nice. That activity, I would like to participate that online luncheon meeting. Sounds fun. But as CEO, you communicate, but you need language skills, right? For the multinational team. Tsunaga-san, you're the UCLA University graduate. I have never heard of you speaking English. Yeah, I'm not a good speaker. I speak a broken English. Of course, all the documents are written in English, but I'm the person who speaks the worst English in my team. Somebody, I will translate for myself. Yusuke is trying to say this. And somebody will translate that for me and summarizes what I want to say. And if I don't know something, they would summarize the comments into easier English. So everyone understands what CEO is thinking. Yes. That's really what they do.
誰かわかるだろうみたいな。で、なんか分かったみたいなやつがすごい言ってくれるっていう感じ。
And those people who understand what I'm trying to say will say something. And they try to, those people who have the experience understands what I am saying. So they get used to
it
what I'm
on time. I think it's almost time. And I think it's a good opportunity from people who are on the venue and if we're online. I would like to ask if there are any questions.
すみません、なんか連続ですみません。
もちろんありがとうございます。
ちょっと仕事柄のちょっとこう質問になってしまって申し訳ないんですけども。
Sorry, talking about the work. You have hired many people from various countries. And some people, how do you enter into the contracts for hiring with those people staying overseas? I was working as a CEO for my previous job, and more than half were coming from various countries like Romania, etc. So there were various backgrounds. How do you deal with those hiring contracts? We have this employment contract as a regular employee, and I send the money using Life, etc. But right now the yen is weaker. We have concluded in denominated in dollars or pounds. It is becoming very expensive, so I should have contracted in yen. In my company, we only have companies in Japan and the US. For the people in Japan, we hire them as regular employees. For those in overseas, for those in the US, we hire them as a regular employee for the US company, and for those in other countries, they are contracted workers for the Japanese companies. And as for the remittance of salaries, for those hired by the Japanese company, we send the money from the accounts in Japan, which is quite costly. And for the US, we pay from the US company. So nothing special that we're doing. We're just following the routine type of practice. And recently, EOR, employer of record, there are many venture companies like that. If you try to hire those people using EOR, it is a bit costly, but it is really convenient. So it might be good using that. Thank you for the advice. EOR is the company will work more like an agent. Many companies are now working with EOR. So if you are interested, I can introduce an EOR company. Any other questions? Lastly, we have many people participating online basis, more than 100 people. There are some people from startups as well. There are many startups who want to create a diverse team with people from diverse nations. Are there any advice to them? I have 2 points. The first is nationality or religion, gender, age. They are not that relevant. Actually, it is really the individual's characteristics. I think that is what really counts. It's not that this person from this certain nationality is difficult or do not work well, etc. That is really not the case. I mentioned that it is quite hard to manage the people from Japan because of the culture. But in terms of capability, competency, it's really dependent on the person himself, herself. So I don't think you have to stick to nationality. And the second point is, even if you don't hire based on their nationalities, I can say 100% that there will be good ideas coming from a diverse range of people. So if you can try, I think it's worth trying. Several years ago during Christmas, our chatbot icon, which is a robot, someone said, because it's Christmas, you should have the robot show like Santa Claus. But someone else said that Santa Claus is a religious type of character. So people said that you should not do that. But another person said, let's make it a snowman. And then another person said snowman is a male, maybe snow woman, or so we decided not to do anything. But even with the small ideas, I think it's really good that you think of working with a diverse range of people. Thank you. It's the same in my case as well. We should hire many people from many countries. Right now, we have people from 12 countries, which is quite good. When there are many people from US, there will be US culture, from Japan, Japan culture. But when it's diverse, people know that the culture is different from theirs. So people respect everyone's culture. We are not a company with a single culture. So I really think it's good that you have people from many countries. And also, even if you cannot speak English that well, it should be okay. It should be manageable. So the success for hiring, one factor is that even if it is a Japanese company, you should say that you don't have to be able to speak Japanese. If you can speak English, that's okay. I think you should start from there. Thank you. Thank you. Time's running out, so please give a big round of applause to the panelists once again. Thank you. Thank you, Tsunagawa-san, Asano-san. Next, we'd like to move on to the next panel discussion. Thank you. This is the last session for today. The title is Outline and Outlook on the Comparative Study on Japan, US Born Global. Firstly, please introduce yourselves. Right now, already you are seeing their pictures and names. We don't have much time, so Fujimoto-san, can you please introduce yourself? Yes, I am responsible for open innovation and corporate venture capital. I am Fujimoto from Sumitomo Life. Our innovation, well-being as a service that is what we are working on right now. Originally, this company is a life insurance company. So vitality or promoting people's health, that is the main objective. This is to promote people who are healthy, but it's not that we want to make only the healthy people happier. We also need people who are not healthy to be happy as well. We are working on various efforts, QOL as well, and also even being aged, you need to be happy. And in particular, in Japan, the area left behind, which is the health condition of female people in Japan. That is a challenge in Japan as well. The service for that purpose, not to always to be creating by ourselves, but with other people as well through open innovation. That is the work that I am doing right now. Thank you in advance. Next, Professor Kanama, please. This is Kanama speaking. Can you hear me? Now, I am also working for Kanazawa University, but on a concurrent basis, I am working for the Institute for Future Initiatives, University of Tokyo. I have wrote a book. Please do not praise the children in front of everyone. That's the book that I wrote today. Sorry, this title has something that is opposite from what we're talking about today. There are younger people in Japan increasingly who are where there are people who are quite reserved. I believe that you would also read this book. That would be good. And after this today, entrepreneurship and ecosystem, I would like to talk about that later on. Thank you. This book is a bestseller. I bought this book as well. And you have also had a dialogue with Hiroyuki-san.
So I'd like to move on to the actual. Sarutani-san, please give us a quick introduction of yourself. So I'd like to talk about quickly about this seminar with Tokyo University and with the Sumitomo Insurance. We have done this research. The purpose is to do a comparative study on global-minded startups in Japan and the US. And we had done an investigation on what is required. So we took 50, randomly picked up 50 companies from Japan and the US relatively, and spin out from the university and institution related, and also seed to later, we have extracted data. And we have analyzed different types of factors, and 3 came up. One, the serial entrepreneur's existence. And this is why we have invited Tom-san to come and speak to us. Randomly, when he picked up the startup in the US, the founder and in the co-founder, well, 60% of the co-founders or founders were serial interpreters. And I'm saying this again, this was randomly picked, and still 60% were so. And in Japan, 20% were the same. So we can see the serial entrepreneurs are gradually increasing, but in the US, it's 3 times more. And another factor is the international investors and mentors. Well, in Japan, the investors, Japanese startups tend to get invested from Japanese investors. The ratio of the international investors was very low. And this is also true when we look at the staging. The US startups try to, at the very early times, try to get invested from different countries, from the angel investors, international investors, or the corporates. So the American startups really focuses on the early startups. Seeds and Series A funds were acquired by 82% of the startups. In Japan's VC starts goes in the late Series A, B, and C. And then when they becomes later, they start to see a bigger investors. So that's the biggest difference. And the third, this was the intent of the panel discussion. A diverse resources team. The female interpreter, 40% in the US, in Japan, startups, 20. So double the amount of females are the interpreters in the US. And when we look at the diversity of the team members, 65% in the US and 4% in Japan. And there were some reports issued which researched about the unicorn companies. 65% of the staff of the unicorns have immigrants. It's not really important which country people are from, but it's very important, our hypothesis, to have diverse multinational team. This is only 100 countries last year, 500 countries last year. So the researchers say this is such a small population mass. Last year, we had only 100 and we did 500. I thought that was big, but the population, according to the researcher, is still very small, too small. And if we, by increasing the mass population, we will be able to see more details. And that's what we're planning to do in the future. That's all. Thank you. And we have slides provided from Kanama. Mr. Kanama, the professor. Yes, hello, my name is Daisuke Kanama. So I have been listening in. So from the academic standpoint, I would like to give some points. The first is serial entrepreneurship and its importance. The importance is being focused and talked about. The first is the people who have succeeded as an interpreter will contribute back their experience and fund ideas. Tom-san already touched upon this already. The message I would like to highlight is this. So this kind of circulation is very important, and the culture will be established by doing so. So these successful serial entrepreneurs tend to stay within the community and the region, and they'll bring diversity to the community and the region, and it's becoming clearer and clearer. And another is this diversity management. This is also important. If we look at the ecosystem, diversity management is not always easy, but when in developing the trust, sometimes the behaviors of female and males are different, and how you are brought up may influence how you behave as well. So scientifically, we cannot conclude that there are always positive influences, because some of the researches focuses on the negative influence by having diverse people collaborating. Some examples would be emotional encounters within the group by having the diverse group, or difference in the value due to generation differences. This is the results of the overseas research. So it's not in Japan. So even in the international community, this is true. So I think this could be same in Japan as well. And in the red-orange box says that in a lot of researches, we don't see the significant correlation between the diversity and team performance. So rather than just looking at the some demographics, we should also look at the psychographics, and we should look at this in a long term. And although it's not clearly shown in data scientifically, we have that when we have a diverse team, the performance sometimes drops and the team would be canceled. But what we have to see is the performance would drop temporarily, but picks up and gradually grows. So we have to look at this in the long term. Thank you very much. Professor Nakanuma has given us an overview of the activities of the last year in academic point of view. Fujimoto-san, can you give us a comment? In the diversity point, diversity, equity, and inclusion is something of a hot topics in Japanese companies, but it's more like doing this out of mandatory, and they're doing it to be seen as a good company, or based on the guidance from the government. So the culture and the mood is more like they're forced to do this because they have to. But if you want to create innovation, you have to be diverse, in my opinion. And especially the startup CEOs have some kind of challenges, handicap, and so there are a lot of diversity in the startups. Also, the value of the individuals will be very diverse when you have a diverse member of members in the team. Performance may drop temporarily, like somebody said, but if you have a diverse perspective and ideas, I think that would lead more easier to the innovation. Can we play on this more, Professor? When we look at there is a research, it's very little, but some research separates the performance and looks at the diversity and its correlation with innovation. So some research concludes that if you have more diversity, the innovation will increase. So major companies, when you try to manage people or take control of the balance between the diversity and the performance, you have to find the right point, right at the best balance. Thank you for the discussion. I would like to move on. There were 3 factors that has been discussed, and in the startups, well, the major companies and startups, major companies and major corporates and the investor. I think this was not that has been covered in the discussion today. Sumitomo Insurance Company, I have experience in a major company, maybe have something to share with us. Okay. In a major company, in the startup company, well, in Japan, the role that the major company has to play, there are more. We are an insurance company. We're a very domestic cultured company. And I just came back, by the way, from few days ago, and I was in the Silicon Valley. I'm shy to say this, but this was the first visit to Silicon Valley in my life, and there was an event. Well-being as a service is our theme. So we want to create an industry with well-being service. And this is why I wanted to appeal to the venture companies in the Silicon Valley to invite them to Japan with the help of JETRO. So what I recognized was that the word that I'm using, well-being, this was not a common phrase in the US. It didn't get through very well. I changed the word to wellness. How it's interpreted and what kind of image it gives seem to be different. When I had a dialogue with people in the Silicon Valley, I recognized that well-being service is something that I would like to deploy, but it made me realize it's important to speak about innovation, not with other domestic companies, but also the companies in the US as well. So having startup companies come to Japan and then sending the startup companies to the US, this interaction is important. But if it's possible, if we're going to have an event in the Silicon Valley, the startups in the Silicon Valley and the startups in Japan should interact together, like having a discussion or collaboration, not only going back and forth visiting each other. Maybe this kind of a discussion will lead to the open innovation, will help to create a new service that's not seen in the US, in Japan, that does not exist. I think big corporations could play a role there. A completely new innovation may come up.
には私もすごく期待するところでございまして、今シリコンバレーのお話が出ましたが、当然シリコンバレーのスタートアップに興味を持っているのは日本の大企業も当然持って
We
いるわ
also
けです。
expect a lot on the role of the Japanese companies. As we had explained, JETRO is not only helping startups, but we are also supporting investment by Japanese companies to overseas. Can you please comment on this point? At JETRO, we are working on J-Bridge. The major Japanese corporations, if they want to work together with overseas startup companies, we try to support that. Like, for example, sourcing and the wish list or their shop list, we source whatever meets the need for the corporations. We work on that. Right now, we have 1,200 Japanese companies participating in this, so it would be good if you could participate. Thank you. the startups and the relationship with them with the Japanese major corporations. Can you please comment, Professor Kanama? I think we're at a difficult stage right now. We are presenting this from Shibuya, with a scenic view. The place that I live is Kanazawa. The core place of Shibuya is quite close to Kanazawa, same number of people, etc. Tony-san was mentioning that in a Q&A, they were mentioning about small city. Having heard what I heard today, what I thought was that particularly the formulation of culture, the culture that is brought from the serial entrepreneurs, I think that is the point. The role of the major corporations, sometimes it's difficult for major corporations to go into that area, but it would be good if I could focus on that area in the small city, small area. If people can go into that area, those companies, not just thinking about their company's own culture, but to create a system. It could be that the network that the major corporations have could be of value to people in those areas. I think these are something that was learned from there, but the deliverables from there, whether we can utilize that I think is a challenge. In the previous slide, the share prices in Japan, market valuation is quite small. Those were the talks. About 30 years ago, there was so much presence of the Japan market. So with that expectation, I would hope that we be more active here. About the ecosystem, because we're running out of time, I'm quite in a rush, but the ecosystem for the startups in Japan, or the session as a whole, the outlook for the demonstrative experiment comparing Japan and US, what can you please comment on that? The outlook for this research. I am talking from an academic position right now. I am in Shibuya. I'm in a difficult position right now. But as for the outlook, the formation of culture, that I really want to emphasize. Very difficult and it takes time. That was also shown in the overseas cases, in particular the successful cases, the phenomenon on the surface tend to be introduced. There are critical researches like that. Many people are nodding, so people know about this well enough. It seems like the culture, formation of culture is of less priority or left behind. I think there are criticism to the academic world on that point as well. In each area, to form that culture, we need to have an ecosystem for that purpose. That is what I want to think about, although this is my personal opinion. Thank you. Culture is indeed so important, not just diversity, but the culture to accept diverse range of people that is needed. I have also failed in the past many times. And next, from Ujimoto-san, the ecosystem about Japan or what you expect on. About the ecosystem first, Japan's ecosystem for innovation is quite closed. They say open innovation, but it's not that open. Like, for example, the large corporations, they tend to think that they are being a bit arrogant because they're providing the money. Like, for example, people with startups starting from scratch, they are more respected in places like Silicon Valley. The innovation ecosystem in Japan, in order for this to be truly open and being equal to everyone, whether academia, local municipalities, from equal footing, from the same perspective, if that is realized, I think it's really good. So I want to aim for that. Yes, we still lack so much human resources in Japan. Tarutani-san, can you please talk about your outlook? Tom-san was saying that he really loves startups. In my first year at JETRO, I worked on startups, and since then I've been working on startups. The culture to respect startups, really like give first for startups. If that culture can be formulated, I think it's good. And also one other thing is that we conducted seminars 3 times last year. And in the first seminar, someone from Berkeley came, and this person was saying that the system players from Japan or startups coming from Japan, they would ask, what is the best practice first? But that actually is wrong. You should try everything. I think that is really the way to think about it. Of course, it's good to copy what others had been doing, but it's better if you try to do something on your own, try to do new things on your own. And when that succeeds, that will become a culture. Thank you. I truly agree to that. The entrepreneurs, when quitting from large corporations and try to start business, some people think that people is quite special or might be a bit weird in a sense, but they should be respected. That should be the case. We're running out of time, but maybe questions or comments from the floor or questions or comments from people participating online. May I ask a question? I am Tamao. Professor Ito, Professor Kanawa, thank you for your presentation. Thank you for the great remarks. From myself, about the balance of risk and challenge in starting a business, I want to ask. Serial entrepreneurship, it was good that we can hear from those people, but doing those would involve risks, and also to step out to do that, you need to make decision by yourself. I think there are challenges there. Thinking only about the risk and not being able to do what you want to do. To avoid that, but being able to challenge, it would be good if you could talk about the balance between the two. Yes, when you conduct a survey against Japanese people, people tend to be quite reserved. People tend to think that it should not be possible for a person to do. Professor Kanama, please. Thank you. I think that is really a good point. I would like to answer in relation to the community or the regions. I live in Kanazawa. Once you fail, that information spreads out gradually to all the people. There will be certain labeling. From that perspective, we still see that. And one other point is that whether visiting from outside, coming from outside, those people would have the labeling as to, oh, that person had failed at some other place. Right now, we still see those labelings and very difficult to change. But the ecosystem by the small cities, if a person has those experiences, go to that person and listen to what they say, and people would gather there. The successful people would also gather, and money will circulate, people will stay in that area. That should happen. So it should be difficult to change everything, but in certain areas, we should create a mood to appreciate those.
Yeah, thank you for that comment. What do you think? Is there a difference in the US and Japan? Well, I don't know if it's Japan or US. I am not the entrepreneur, but looking at the founders, I found some common topic. Entrepreneurs are very interested in trying to solve a problem strongly. And these are the people who usually start up. And when they're trying to found a company, when I say, I don't know if that's a good idea, they don't listen to you. They don't worry about the risks. They don't think about the risk. They just go ahead and do what they think will solve the big problem. And these people I know has a lot of hardships, but somehow they find a way to solve it and become successful. I think this is true both for the US and Japan. I think there's a question. Go ahead. Thank you. I like to listen to the politicians speak, and when they talk about the startup policy, they say there are areas that Japan should change and where they should not change. I hear this kind of discussion a lot spoken by the politicians and diversity, but in Japan, nails that stick out are always hit by a hammer. They don't like people who are unique. I am a background of the US and Japan. So the entrepreneur fails, but learns from the failure and continues that. But in Japan, you cannot fail. You'll be a failure for a lifetime. The people who stay in one company and who is protected by the social welfare and being a stable income is a better person, kind of. So in Japan, in order for us to change, so we have more startups, I think we have to relook at our culture. Of course, there are a beauty in Japanese culture, but there are areas as well that we need to change for our future, and especially in the diversity perspective, diversity in terms of idea, in terms of people, or gender, or people who are physically challenged. These individual differences, well, in the US, individualistic society, I think, is nurtured. In Japan, it's more protectionism. So what I'm trying to say is, what can we do to change this kind of culture in society? Thank you. Kishida, government, here talking about the first year of the startups. Please. In Japan, when we look at the employees of the major companies and why they don't become entrepreneurs, because they're really worried about losing their job if they fail. And now I hire people, but I look for people who have founded a company on their own. Even if the person failed, that would always contribute to the next innovation. So I am looking for somebody who has founded a company when I hire people. So when we look at the startups versus major company, that's how the politician talk. But I think it should be where you could go both ways. You could work in the major company, be an entrepreneur, vice versa. And by mixing and sharing the success and the failure, I think we could both from each other. I don't think this is a system problem. I think this is a more cultural problem. I'm hoping this kind of culture could be promoted. May I? Yes. Somebody said the nails that stick up is hit by the hammer. So what is the hammer and what is the sticking out nail? I'm dismantling all this. So the nails that stick up, those are more very skillful people who are very good. But the hammer, who's the hammer and what's the hammer? I have never seen a hammer. So the the biggest case is, I think, the rule. I don't think it's a person who is hitting the hammer to trying to smash somebody who's sticking up in terms of skills or unique. So it's always the rules. Are you obeying the rules of the university, rules of the society? So rules versus your behavior is always compared against each other. And if you are off from this rule, even by slightly, you're always hit by the hammer. But I think the administrators who are checking to see if everybody's obeying the rules are starting to question this kind of behavior and habits. May I? Yes. Well, time is running out, unfortunately, but if you really want to ask a last question, we're open. People from online, okay? Okay, so thank you very much. I'd like to end the last session, the panel discussion. So please give big round of applause for the panelists. Thank you very much. Before the closing of this seminar, I would like to ask two members to give us some words of the closing. Representing the Shibuya Bit Valley, which was the venue for this session, would like to ask Mr. Toshio Watanabe, Vice President and Executive Officer of Tokyo University, Institute for Future Initiatives, University of Tokyo, give us a closing remark. Hello, everyone. Representing the Bit Valley, I am Nojima of Cyber Agent. Watanabe Sensei, Professor Watanabe has invited me to come here to speak at JETRO, so asked me to come. Thank you for inviting me to come here today. First of all, the Bit Valley is something that I would like to quickly introduce. The Bit Valley is a group in 2018 has established, this is a project that it was established in 2018, which was established annually. This was when the Shibuya was restructured and where the companies has been reorganizing themselves. Cyber, Mixi, GMO, for companies agreed and committed themselves to creating this area like a Silicon Valley, so supported the technicians and the venture companies. So supporting the technicians, well, it's a severe, we would give educate elementary and junior high school students about how to do the programming, or the business plan contest is executed. And for the university students, we share information about, give them information and provide them a career education on what could expect in the industry of the IT. And we also have the working group of startup ecosystem, and we provide support in this field as well. I really enjoyed the session today, and I received very valuable feedbacks. And there was a talk about serial entrepreneur. We too are supporting our employees internally become internal serial entrepreneurs. I say this because we have business plan contest once a year, and we have maximum of 1,000 entrepreneurial ideas internally within our company. And we have started out by the advertisement, and we have also done the ABEMA, as you have seen in the World Cup. For companies in the Bit Valley are continuously generating new services and products. And also, people spoke about international investment. And I felt that creating the environment, right environment, is a key for success. And what we always say internally is collaboration and competition. So we'll support each other where we need, but we'll grow and learn from each other by competing with each other. And we'll create a relationship in a way. And we tend to focus on the issue solution, problem solution, when we try to nurture a culture. That's also important, but listening to people in many ways, like this session, is a good way for us to learn what are the issues that people are seeing and trying to find a solution to solve people's problems and issues. And corporate culture is created by people, individuals, values, and behaviors. And I think accumulation and a collection of people and how they behave and think will create the corporate culture, and that led me to think that having diverse resources and people in one company will be very important to create diverse corporate culture. And thank you. Thank you.
続きまして、
Thank you, Nojima-san. Next, Vice President and Executive Office of the University of Tokyo and Professor of Institute for Future Initiatives, we're asking Professor Watanabe for the closing remarks. Thank you very much. With JETRO and Sumitomo Life, we are conducting this big project. And today we had Tony-san, Tom-san, Asano-san, Tsunagawa-san. We had very interesting talks from them as well. Thank you so much. This project, as was mentioned in the second panel discussion, this is a project conducted from an academic standpoint, but also we're trying to come up with a policy recommendation in order to reflect on the practical aspects as well. The University of Tokyo, in the topics that was talked about today, the university is respecting this diversity. The person who assumed the role of president of University of Tokyo last year, saying that diversity is the key word. The president is specialized in ocean studies, diverse ocean, diversity in the ocean, that's also important, but very strongly focusing on diversity and inclusion for the university as well. From that perspective, for startups, diversity is of so much importance. Talking about the University of Tokyo, several years ago, the University of Tokyo didn't have that much image of ventures or startups. The University of Tokyo, when you graduate, you become a scholar, researcher, or a bureaucrat, or join a major company. That was the image of University of Tokyo. Since 2016, when I started working on supporting startup companies, that was the case. But at that time, there were some venture companies coming out from the University of Tokyo. There were articles on newspapers, and I was thinking that there are venture companies coming from University of Tokyo. I want this image to be held by the people, students in Japan, and other people as well. And right now, from University of Tokyo, there are about 40 startups coming every year, total for 80 companies. They start and exit. We're seeing high growth among some of the companies. When we see those companies, it is the case that we're not catching up at all with other countries overseas, whether in US or Canada. Comparing with US or Canada, we have to increase to the next digit. We have to grow even faster. For example, when we look at the students, when there is a student from overseas, it will certainly become global, whether people visiting from China, students visiting from China, etc. That is really important. And the supporting institutions or the venture capital, there is an institution called UTEC. University of Tokyo is 5% shareholder of that. So now the culture is being formulated in the University of Tokyo. But what we are doing is we have to work more on diversity. I think that is the role of the university as well. Why we are doing this event in Shibuya, from overseas perspective, there is not that of a change, but Shibuya and Hongo, the culture is quite different. Bit Valley, and for Hongo, we call Hongo Valley, but rather it's a hill or mountainous area rather than a valley, but still, this is also a new trial from the perspective of diversity, working Hongo to work with everyone else. We would like to ask for a contribution as well. This project is now about half of the process, but we hope that we can work further on this project. I think there will be chances for exchanging business cards. Maybe I can give remarks there as well. Thank you so much. Thank you, Professor Watanabe. This will conclude the seminar for today. If okay, once again, thank you very much for your participation today.